Dr. Elena Vasquez rubbed her tired eyes and stared at the computer screen for the 100th time that night. The numbers didn't lie, but she desperately wished they would. The coffee in her NASA mug had gone cold hours ago, but she couldn't tear herself away from the data streaming in from the Kepler Space Observatory. Something massive was heading toward Earth, something that would change everything. The solar flare erupting from the sun's surface was unlike anything scientists had ever recorded. Most solar storms were predictable, giving Earth at least a few days to prepare. This one had burst from the far side of the sun with such violence that it caught every space weather monitoring system completely off guard. Elena pulled up the projection models again, hoping she had made a calculation error somewhere. But the results remained the same. In exactly 72 hours, a wall of electromagnetic energy would slam into Earth with the force of 1,000 nuclear bombs. Not the explosive kind that destroys buildings, but the invisible kind that fries every piece of electronic equipment on the planet. She thought about what that meant. No cell phones, no internet, no power grids, no satellites, no GPS systems guiding planes safely to airports, no hospital equipment keeping patients alive, no refrigeration keeping food fresh, no water pumps bringing clean water to cities. In one devastating moment, humanity would be thrown back to the Stone Age. The worst part was that nobody saw it coming until it was too late. Elena stood up from her desk and walked to the window overlooking the NASA campus. The parking lot was nearly empty at 3 in the morning, just a few scattered cars belonging to researchers like herself who couldn't sleep when the world was about to end. The security lights cast long shadows across the pavement, and she wondered if those lights would ever turn on again after the storm hit. Her phone buzzed with another urgent message from Dr. Chun, the director of the Space Weather Prediction Center. They had been trying all night to find some way to warn the world and prepare for what was coming. But 72 hours wasn't enough time to shut down power grids safely, move satellites to protective positions, or even evacuate hospitals that depended on electronic life support systems. The harsh reality was that humanity was about to face its greatest disaster, and there was almost nothing they could do to stop it. Elena walked back to her computer and pulled up the global communication networks. Every major space agency, every government, every emergency response team on Earth was working frantically to prepare for the coming storm. But she could see in the data streams that they were fighting a losing battle. The storm was simply too powerful and arriving too quickly. That's when she had the idea that would change everything. For years, Elena had worked on SETI projects, scanning the cosmos for signs of intelligent life. She had spent countless nights pointing radio telescopes at distant stars, hoping to catch even the faintest whisper of an alien civilization. Like most scientists, she believed that life existed somewhere out there in the vast universe, but finding it seemed impossible given the enormous distances between stars. Now, as she stared at the data showing humanity's approaching doom, she realized something important. If Earth was about to lose all its technology, this might be humanity's last chance to send any kind of message to the cosmos. After the storm hit, it could be decades or even centuries before Earth could broadcast into space again. Elena's hands began moving across her keyboard before she had fully thought through what she was doing. She started accessing every radio telescope and satellite transmitter that NASA had access to. The Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico, the Very Large Array in New Mexico, the Deep Space Network stations in California, Spain, and Australia, even the International Space Station's communication systems. Her security clearance allowed her to commandeer these systems during emergencies, and if this wasn't an emergency, nothing was done as she worked. Elena thought about what message to send. It had to be something that any intelligent species could understand, regardless of what language they spoke or how their minds worked. Mathematics seemed like the obvious choice. Numbers were universal. The same physics that governed Earth also governed every other planet in the universe. She started with prime numbers. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Any civilization advanced enough to travel between stars would recognize this pattern immediately. It was like a cosmic handshake, a way of saying, we are intelligent beings who understand the universe. But prime numbers alone weren't enough? Elena needed to communicate urgency, desperation, and most importantly, Earth's location in space. She added Earth's coordinates, calculated based on the position of nearby pulsars that any advanced civilization would be able to detect. She included information about Earth's sun, its size, and position in the galaxy. She even added basic information about human DNA, thinking that any species capable of interstellar travel might be interested in the biological diversity of life on other worlds. The hardest part was communicating the emergency itself. How do you explain to alien minds that your entire civilization is about to collapse? Elena decided to use simple mathematical patterns that showed something catastrophic approaching Earth from the direction of the sun. As she assembled the message, Elena realized she was probably wasting precious time that could be spent helping with Earth's preparations. The chances of any alien civilization receiving and understanding the message were incredibly small. Even if they did understand it, what could they possibly do to help from distances measured in light years? But something deep inside her refused to give up. Maybe it was the scientist in her, always reaching for answers in the unknown. Maybe it was simple human stubbornness in the face of impossible odds. Or maybe it was just the desperate hope that somewhere out there someone was listening. Elena finished programming the message and aimed every available transmitter toward different sections of the galaxy. She set the broadcast to repeat continuously, sending humanity's mathematical cry for help racing toward the stars at the speed of light. Standing in the quiet control room, she spoke into the microphone that would carry her voice to the cosmos. If anyone out there can hear this, humanity needs help. We have 71 hours before our world goes dark. She pressed the transmission button and watched as Earth's most powerful communication systems began broadcasting into the void. Radio waves carrying humanity's desperate pleas spread out from Earth like ripples in a cosmic pond, traveling toward distant stars that might harbor intelligent life. Elena had no way of knowing that her message would reach 47 different alien civilizations within the first hour. She had no idea that those civilizations had been quietly watching Earth for centuries, waiting for humanity to mature enough for contact. She couldn't have imagined that her desperate SOS would trigger the largest rescue mission in galactic history. All she knew was that she had done everything possible to save her species. Now all she could do was wait and pray that someone, somewhere in the vast universe, was listening and cared enough to answer. The transmission continued broadcasting as Elena finally collapsed into her chair, exhausted but oddly hopeful. For the first time in human history, Earth was actively calling out to the stars. And unknown to her, the stars were already preparing to answer. Commander Zeph 4471 was enjoying his morning meditation when the universe changed forever. The tall, blue-skinned being sat in his favorite spot aboard the starship Harmony, watching the colors of distant nebulae shift through the observation deck's massive windows. At 800 years old, he had seen many things in his long service to the Altarian Collective, but nothing had prepared him for what happened next. The ship's communication system suddenly erupted with an urgent alarm that he had never heard before. In all his centuries of deep space exploration, this particular alert had never sounded. It meant only one thing: first contact with a previously unknown intelligent species. Zeph rushed to the communication center, his long legs carrying him through the ship's curved corridors faster than he had moved in decades. When he arrived, his communication officer was staring at her screen with an expression of complete shock. "Commander," she said without looking up, "you need to see this immediately. We're receiving a signal from the Sol system." Zeph felt his heart skip a beat. The Sol system contained a small blue planet that the Collective had been monitoring for thousands of years. The primitive species living there was still centuries away from developing interstellar travel. They barely had the technology to leave their own planet, let alone communicate across the galaxy. "Are you certain it's from the third planet?" Zeph asked, moving closer to examine the data streaming across the screens. "Absolutely certain, sir. The signal is originating from multiple points on the planet's surface, and Commander ... She paused, her voice trembling with excitement. The mathematical complexity is extraordinary. This isn't random noise. This is deliberate, sophisticated communication. Zeph studied the signal patterns flowing across the monitors. Prime numbers, arranged in perfect sequences. Geometric patterns that demonstrated advanced mathematical understanding. Most remarkably, the signal contained precise astronomical coordinates that could only have been calculated by beings who understood their place in the galaxy, but there was something else in the transmission that made Zeph's blood run cold. Embedded within the mathematical elegance was a pattern that every spacefaring civilization recognized instantly. A distress call. "They're asking for help," Zeph whispered, hardly believing his own words. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing. Out on dozens of different worlds, the crystalline beings of Proxima 7, who normally spent their time in century-long philosophical debates, suddenly found their entire collective consciousness focused on the strange signal from Solfri. Their thoughts moved like living glass, analyzing every aspect of the transmission with growing amazement. The beings of Proxima 7 had always believed that intelligence was rare in the universe. They had encountered only a handful of other species in their long history. But this signal was different from anything they had ever detected. It showed not just intelligence, but something they had never seen before, a species asking the entire galaxy for help. On the edge of the Kepler system, the vast hive mind known as the Swarm allocated thousands of processing units to decode the mysterious transmission. The Swarm thought differently than individual beings. Their consciousness flowed through millions of interconnected minds, each one contributing to a collective intelligence that spanned entire star systems. To the Swarm, the human signal was fascinating because it came from individual minds working together. They could detect the signature patterns of separate consciousnesses, all contributing to the same desperate message. It was like watching a small version of their own collective intelligence, but built from completely separate beings who had chosen to work together. Even the notoriously difficult vegan empire found themselves stopping their military exercises to study the transmission. The vegans were warriors by nature, a species that had conquered dozens of worlds through superior technology and tactical brilliance. They rarely paid attention to primitive species, considering most of them too weak to be worth their time. But something about humanity's signal caught their attention. The mathematical patterns showed a species that understood warfare and destruction. The coordinates revealed beings who could accurately map their position in a hostile universe. Most importantly, the distress call itself demonstrated something the vegans respected above all else: the courage to fight for survival against impossible odds. However, it was Captain Sarah who acted first. Sarah belonged to no government and served no empire. She was what the galaxy called a free trader, moving cargo and passengers between worlds in her ship, the Starweaver. More importantly, she was a member of a secret organization that most governments pretended didn't exist. The Sanctuary Network was made up of beings from across the galaxy who shared a common belief that emerging civilizations deserve protection, not conquest. They operated in the shadows, quietly helping young species develop without interference from the major galactic powers. It was dangerous work that could result in exile or worse if they were caught. Sarah had been transporting refugees from a world destroyed by civil war when the human signal reached her ship. She was only 15 light-years from Earth, practically next door by galactic standards. As soon as her computers finished analyzing the transmission, she knew what she had to do. "Kale, plot a course for the Sol system," she called to her navigator, a former military officer who had joined her crew after becoming disgusted with his government's aggressive expansion policies. "Captain," Kale replied, studying his instruments, "that system is under observation protocols. If we approach that world, we'll be violating about 50 different galactic treaties." Sarah smiled grimly. "Then we better make sure nobody sees." "US, how fast can you get us there?" Kale ran calculations through his navigation computer. "If we push the quantum drives beyond safe parameters, we can fold space and reach them in 68 hours. But Captain, those drives weren't designed for that kind of stress. We could tear the ship apart." And if we don't go, an entire civilization dies, Sarah replied. Prep the engines for maximum fold. We're going to save some humans. As the Star Weavers. Engines began building power for the dangerous journey. Sarah sent out a coded message on frequencies used by the Sanctuary Network. Within hours, her signal reached other free traders, retired military officers, and idealistic explorers scattered across dozens of worlds. The message was simple. First official distress call received from Sol 3, species, facing extinction in approximately 70 hours. All available sanctuary vessels respond immediately. What happened next surprised even Sarah. The response to her call was unlike anything the Sanctuary Network had ever organized. Ships began converging on the Sol system from across the galaxy. Not just Sanctuary Network vessels, but official government ships, military fleets, and even vessels from species that had been enemies for centuries. Elena's desperate message had done something unprecedented in galactic history. It had united dozens of different civilizations around a single purpose: saving a species they had never met from a disaster they could barely comprehend. As Sarah's ship screamed through folded space toward Earth, she wondered what kind of beings could create such a powerful call for help. She had heard distress signals before, but never one that carried such mathematical beauty combined with such raw desperation. The Starweaver's engines pushed beyond their design limits, warping space around the ship as it raced toward a small, blue world where an entire species waited unknowingly for the greatest rescue mission in galactic history to arrive. Behind Sarah, dozens of other ships were making similar journeys, all racing to answer humanity's first call to the stars. Elena hadn't slept in 48 hours, and her body was running purely on adrenaline and fear. The NASA Emergency Command Center buzzed with frantic activity as dozens of scientists, military officials, and government representatives worked desperately to prepare Earth for the approaching solar storm. Coffee cups and energy drink cans littered every desk, and the air was thick with tension and exhaustion. She sat hunched over her computer, coordinating with power companies around the world to shut down electrical grids in a carefully timed sequence. It was like performing surgery on a patient who was already dying. Even if they managed to save some infrastructure, billions of people would still be plunged into darkness when the storm hit in just 18 hours. Elena rubbed her burning eyes and glanced at the wall of monitors showing data streams from around the globe. Every major city was racing against time to protect whatever they could. Hospitals were switching to backup generators. Airlines were grounding flights. Communication companies were desperately trying to move satellites to safer orbital positions, but everyone knew it wouldn't be enough. That's when every screen in the facility suddenly flickered and went black. "We've lost connection to monitoring satellites," called out Dr. Rodriguez from across the room, his voice tight with panic. "All of them, simultaneously." Elena's heart sank. If they had lost their space-based observation systems, they would be flying blind during the most critical hours before the storm arrived. But then something impossible happened. The screens flickered back to life, but instead of showing the familiar data streams and satellite feeds, they displayed something that made Elena's breath catch in her throat. Every monitor in the facility was showing the exact same image, a massive, sleek vessel hanging in space just beyond Earth's moon. The ship was unlike anything humans had ever imagined. It seemed to be made of some kind of liquid metal that constantly shifted and flowed, reflecting the light of distant stars in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The vessel was easily a kilometer long, gracefully curved like a work of art rather than a machine of war. "What the hell is that?" Someone whispered from behind Elena. Before anyone could answer, Elena's phone started ringing. Not just her phone, but every phone, radio, and communication device in the building. She picked up her cell phone with shaking hands and heard the voice that would change everything. "This is Captain Sarah of the vessel Starweaver to the inhabitants of Sol 3. The voice said, speaking in perfect English with no accent whatsoever. "We received your distress call." "We are here to help." Elena dropped her phone. Around the command center, dozens of other people were having the same reaction as the impossible message. reached every communication device on Earth simultaneously. The alien voice wasn't just speaking English, it was somehow broadcasting in every human language at once, automatically translating itself so that every person on the planet could understand. The President of the United States was on the emergency hotline within minutes. Along with leaders from every major nation on Earth, Elena found herself suddenly thrust into the most important conversation in human history simply because she was the one who had sent the original signal. Dr. Vasquez, came the urgent voice of President Chun through the secure communication system. You need to respond to them. You're our best chance of establishing meaningful contact. Elena's hands trembled as she activated the communication system that would broadcast her voice to the alien ship. For the second time in her life, she found herself speaking to the cosmos, but now the cosmos was actually listening. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez representing Earth, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. We didn't know anyone was listening. Can you really help us? The response came immediately, and it sent chills through everyone in the command center. Dr. Vasquez, your species' mathematical cry for help has traveled to 47 different civilizations. The Starweaver is merely the first to arrive. Look to your skies. Elena rushed to the window and stared up at the night sky. At first, she saw nothing unusual. Then, like stars being born, points of light began appearing in the darkness. Not just one or two, but dozens of them, each growing brighter as massive alien vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel and took positions. Around Earth, the ships were as different from each other as they were from anything humans had ever conceived. One looked like a living crystal that pulsed with internal light. Another resembled a massive metal tree with branches that seemed to reach toward Earth protectively. A third appeared to be made entirely of swirling energy, its form constantly shifting between solid matter and pure light. Elena realized she was witnessing the arrival of the largest fleet in galactic history, all coming to answer humanity's desperate call for help. Back at the communication center, Captain Sarah's voice continued to provide impossible comfort to a panicking world. Dr. Vasquez, my ship carries refugees from worlds that have faced similar disasters. We know what it means to watch your home die. We also know that no species should face extinction alone. Elena found her voice again, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. How many of you are there? 47 ships have arrived. So far, representing 23 different civilizations. More are coming. Your mathematical distress signal was not just heard, Dr. Vasquez, it was beautiful. It showed us a species that understood the universe well enough to ask for help in a language we could all comprehend. Around the command center, people were crying. Some from relief, others from the overwhelming realization that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. Elena felt tears streaming down her own face as she grasped the magnitude of what was happening. Her desperate message, sent in humanity's darkest hour, had not only reached alien civilizations but had moved them to action. Beings who had never met a human who owed Earth nothing, had traveled across impossible distances to help save a world they had only just learned existed. What do you need us to do? Elena asked, her scientific mind already shifting into problem-solving mode despite the emotional chaos surrounding her. Nothing, Sarah replied, and Elena could hear something like warmth in the alien captain's voice. Your part is done, Dr. Vasquez. You called out to the galaxy and the galaxy answered. Now it's our turn to work. Through the windows of the command center, Elena could see more ships arriving every few minutes. The night sky was becoming crowded, with vessels from across the galaxy, each one bringing technology and capabilities that humanity couldn't even dream of. But perhaps the most remarkable thing wasn't the advanced technology or the impossible ships. It was the simple fact that when one small planet had asked the universe for help, the universe had said yes. Elena sank into her chair, overwhelmed by exhaustion and wonder. The solar storm was still coming, still racing toward Earth with enough power to destroy modern civilization. But for the first time in days, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Above Earth, 47 alien vessels began coordinating the greatest rescue mission in galactic history, all because one Human scientists had found the courage to ask the stars for help. Elena watched from the NASA command center as the most incredible 16 hours in human history unfolded before her eyes. What had started as humanity's darkest moment was becoming something beyond her wildest dreams. The alien fleet surrounding Earth had grown to nearly 60 ships, each one bringing capabilities that defied everything humans thought they knew about physics. She had become the unofficial ambassador between Earth and the rescue fleet, translating desperate human needs into requests that beings from across the galaxy could understand. Her coffee-stained NASA uniform had become the most important outfit in human history, worn by the woman who was coordinating the salvation of an entire world. Captain Sarah's voice filled the command center as she explained what was about to happen. Dr. Vasquez, we need you to understand that what you're about to witness has never been attempted before. 47 different species, many of whom have been enemies for centuries, are about to work together to save your world. Elena gripped her communication headset tighter. What do you need from us? Simply stay out of our way and trust us, Sarah replied with what sounded like gentle humor. Your species has done the hardest part already. You asked for help when you needed it most. Now let us show you what the galaxy can accomplish when it works together. Through the massive windows of the command center, Elena could see the alien ships moving into positions around Earth. The coordination was breathtaking. Vessels that looked nothing like each other, built by species with completely different ways of thinking, moved together like dancers in a carefully choreographed performance. The crystalline beings from Proxima 7 had brought ships that looked like living diamonds, their faceted surfaces reflecting Earth's sunlight in patterns that created rainbow bridges across the sky. Elena learned that these creatures could manipulate electromagnetic energy in ways that human science couldn't explain. Their ships were already extending invisible shields that would protect Earth's electronic systems from the coming storm. Commander Zeph's Altarian vessel positioned itself between Earth and the approaching solar blast. Elena watched in amazement as the ship's hull began to expand, growing larger and larger until it formed a massive barrier that could absorb the storm's initial impact. The Altarians had developed technology that could literally eat electromagnetic energy and convert it into harmless light, but it was the arrival of the Vegan Empire's fleet that truly shocked everyone, including the other aliens. Elena had learned from Captain Sarah that the vegans were known throughout the galaxy as warriors who trusted no one and helped no one outside their own empire. They were the species that other civilizations feared most, known for their advanced weapons and their policy of conquering rather than negotiating. When 12 massive vegan warships dropped out of hyperspace and took positions around Earth, every human military leader assumed the worst. These weren't rescue ships, they were vessels designed for destruction, bristling with weapons that could turn planets into space dust. Elena's hand shook as she opened a communication channel to the lead vegan vessel. She had no idea what to say to a species that supposedly solved all problems through violence. The voice that answered was deep and resonant, like metal grinding against stone. I am War Leader Corinth of the Vegan 4th Battle Fleet. We received the distress call from Sol 3. Elena took a deep breath. Are you here to help us, or? Dr. Vasquez, the alien commander interrupted. The Vegan Empire has a saying, honor is found not in conquest, but in choosing when to fight and when to protect. Today we choose to protect. Elena nearly fainted with relief as she watched the vegan warships began unloading massive cylindrical objects into Earth's orbit. Each cylinder was the size of a city block, and there were hundreds of them. Captain Sarah's voice explained what Elena was seeing. Those are emergency power generators, Dr. Vasquez. Each one can provide electricity for an entire city for months. The vegans are giving Earth backup power systems more advanced than anything your species has ever imagined. Elena realized she was witnessing something that was changing not just Earth's fate, but the entire galaxy's understanding of what cooperation could achieve. Species that had been at war for thousands of years were working side by side to save a world they had never even visited. The Kepler swarm arrived next. and their contribution was perhaps the most spectacular of all. Their ships looked like massive metallic clouds, constantly shifting and changing shape. Elena learned that the swarm was actually composed of millions of tiny individual robots, each one no bigger than a human hand, but all working together as a single consciousness dot as Elena watched. The swarm began to separate into countless small components that spread across Earth's atmosphere like living rain. Each tiny robot was programmed to repair damaged electronics instantly. When the solar storm hit, these microscopic helpers would fix power lines, communication towers, and computer systems faster than the storm could destroy them. It's like having millions of tiny repair crews working everywhere at once, Elena whispered in amazement, but perhaps the most touching moment came when a small, battered ship arrived carrying just 6 crew members. Elena learned that this was a civilian vessel operated by a family of traders who had heard about Earth's crisis and abandoned their regular cargo. Run to help. They couldn't offer advanced technology or massive protective shields. What they brought was something simpler but equally precious: medical supplies and food that would work with human biology. They had spent their entire savings to purchase emergency rations that Earth's population could actually eat, just in case the rescue mission failed and humans needed to survive without technology for months. Elena found herself crying again as she thanked them for their sacrifice. These alien strangers had given up everything to help a species they had never met, simply because they believed it was the right thing to do. As the solar storm approached its final hours, Elena stood in the command center watching alien ships coordinate the most complex rescue operation in galactic history. Energy shields powered by 6 different types of technology created layers of protection around Earth, massive collectors prepared to absorb and redirect the storm's electromagnetic fury. Millions of repair drones waited to fix whatever damage managed to get through. Most remarkably, species that had been enemies for millennia were sharing their most advanced secrets with each other to make the rescue work. The crystalline beings taught the Altarians new ways to manipulate energy. The vegans shared defensive technology with species they had been fighting just days earlier. The Kepler swarm coordinated its repair efforts with civilizations that had completely different ways of thinking. Elena realized that her desperate SOS had done more than just save Earth. It had created something unprecedented in galactic history. A moment when the entire galaxy worked together for a common cause. The solar storm was now just 2 hours away, but Elena was no longer afraid. Looking up at the sky filled with protective alien vessels, she knew that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. More than that, they had learned that the galaxy was full of beings who believed that no world should face extinction alone. The greatest rescue mission in cosmic history was about to begin, and it all started because one frightened human scientist had found the courage to ask the stars for help. 6 months after the solar storm that should have ended human civilization, Elena stood in what used to be the United Nations building in New York. The familiar assembly hall had been completely transformed, expanded with alien technology to accommodate representatives from 47 different worlds. The ceiling now stretched impossibly high, supported by crystalline pillars that hummed with energy from the Proxima 7 builders. The walls shimmered with translation technology that allowed beings with completely different ways of communicating to understand each other perfectly. Elena wore a simple blue dress instead of her old NASA uniform, but the weight of responsibility she carried was far heavier than any scientist had ever borne. She was no longer just Dr. Elena Vasquez, the researcher who had sent humanity's first message to the stars. She was now Earth's first galactic ambassador, representing not just her own species, but a completely new way of thinking about civilization itself. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. In the months following the rescue, Earth had become something unprecedented in galactic history, the headquarters of the first truly cooperative interstellar government. The building around her buzzed with activity as beings from across the galaxy worked together to draft what they called the Soul Accords, a set of principles that would govern how civilizations treated each other throughout the cosmos. Elena walked through the corridors, still amazed by the diversity of life the universe had produced. She passed a group of crystalline beings from Proxima 7 who were discussing philosophy with human professors, their thoughts creating patterns of light that danced through the air. In another room, vegan military engineers worked alongside human architects to design new cities that could withstand any natural disaster. The irony of Earth's new role wasn't lost on anyone. Humanity was by far the least technologically advanced species in the Alliance. Their ships couldn't travel faster than light, their computers were primitive compared to alien technology, and their understanding of the universe was still in its infancy. Yet somehow, this small blue planet had become the center of galactic civilization. Elena understood why. It wasn't because humans were special or superior. It was because of what her desperate SOS had proven to the galaxy, that asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness, but the foundation of true strength. Every other species had developed in isolation, believing that survival meant being stronger than everyone else. Humanity had shown them something different. As she entered the main assembly hall, Elena saw representatives from dozens of worlds preparing for the day's session. Commander Zeph of the Altarians was reviewing proposals with war leader Corinth of the Vegan Empire. 6 months ago, these two species had been locked in a territorial dispute that had lasted for centuries. Now they were working together to establish emergency response protocols that would help any world facing disaster. Captain Sarah approached Elena with a warm smile. The alien trader had become one of Elena's closest friends and advisors during the months of negotiations. Her ship, the Starweaver, had been permanently stationed in Earth's orbit, serving as a mobile embassy for the dozens of civilizations that wanted to establish formal relations with humanity. "Ready for today's big vote?" Sarah asked, her translator converting her words into perfect English. Elena nodded, though she felt nervous butterflies in her stomach. Today, the Galactic Cooperative Council would vote on the most important principle. In the Soul Accords, the humanity principle, it was named after her species, but it represented something much larger than just Earth. The humanity principle was simple in concept, but revolutionary in practice. Any species that asked for help would receive it, regardless of their technology level, political system, or past conflicts. It meant that the advanced civilizations of the galaxy would actively protect and assist younger species instead of ignoring them or conquering them. Elena took her place at the central podium, looking out at the assembled representatives of 47 different worlds. Some looked humanoid, others were completely alien in form. But all of them had come together because of the message she had sent into space during humanity's darkest hour. 6 months ago, Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems, I sent a message into space because my world was about to die. I had no idea if anyone would hear it. I had no idea if anyone would care. But you did hear it, and you did care, and because of that, everything has changed. She paused, looking at the faces and forms of beings from across the galaxy. My species learned something that night that I think the galaxy needed to learn too. We learned that we're not alone. Not just in the sense that other life exists, but in the sense that when we face impossible challenges, we don't have to face them alone. Elena gestured toward the massive display screens, showing star charts of the 47 worlds represented in the assembly. Each of your civilizations developed by becoming strong enough to survive on your own. You built weapons to defend yourselves. You developed technology to solve your own problems. You created governments to manage your own affairs. And all of that was necessary and good. She took a deep breath before continuing. But my species discovered something different that night when the solar storm was coming. We discovered that sometimes being strong enough means being brave enough to admit when you need help. And we discovered that the universe is full of beings who are willing to give that help, even to strangers they've never met. The assembly hall was completely silent as Elena spoke. She could see beings from dozens of different worlds listening intently, many of them nodding and understanding despite their alien features. The humanity principle isn't really about my species, Elena continued. It's about all of us. It's about creating a galaxy where no world has to face extinction alone, where advanced civilizations help younger ones develop instead of conquering, them where enemies can become allies when facing a common threat. Elena looked directly at war leader Corinth as she spoke her next words. 6 months ago, the vegan empire was considered the most feared military force in the galaxy. Today, vegan relief ships are helping rebuild 3 different worlds that were damaged by natural disasters. That transformation didn't happen because the vegans became weaker. It happened because they discovered that true strength comes from knowing when to fight and when to protect. The vegan commander stood up, his massive form towering over the other representatives. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of a being who had conquered dozens of worlds. The human speaks truth. The vegan empire votes yes on the humanity principle. One by one, the representatives of 47 worlds cast their votes. Elena watched in amazement as every single civilization voted to approve the principle that would transform galactic civilization. The universe had officially agreed that helping others was more important than helping only yourself. As the voting concluded, Elena felt tears streaming down her face. Her desperate message to the stars hadn't just saved Earth, it had created a new kind of galaxy, one based on cooperation instead of competition, on mutual aid instead of conquest. Later that evening, Elena stood on the observation deck of the transformed UN building, looking up at the night sky. It was no longer empty and cold. Instead, it was filled with the lights of friendly alien vessels, coming and going from Earth's orbital stations like visitors to a busy neighborhood. Captain Sarah joined her at the window. "What are you thinking about?" the alien captain asked. Elena smiled, still looking up at the stars. "I'm thinking about that night when I first called out to the cosmos. I was so afraid that no one was listening. But the universe wasn't silent at all. It was just waiting for us to join the conversation." She turned to face her alien friend. All it took was admitting we needed help. The greatest discovery in human history hadn't come from exploring the stars, but from having the courage to tell them that humanity was afraid of the dark. And in return, the galaxy had shown them that they would never have to face the darkness alone again.